Right, so now I've got some images in, we're comfortable with placing images, replacing images, we can scale them, we can do some nice corner effects on here. What I want to do is apply some actual effects to the frames, okay, things like drop shadows and gradient feathers and things like that, just to give them a bit more of a subtle feel, okay, because the thing with InDesign, we're working with frames, it's very hard to get away from that sharp edge of a frame, okay, so things like subtle drop shadows and things can really help that. There's quite a lot of effects we can add in InDesign as well. So again, like most things that we do in InDesign, it's controlled by a panel. So I'll get to a window, I'm going to come down to effects, and this here is my effects panel. Okay, so it works on basically any object that we've got selected. What I'm actually going to do is just ungroup these for now. Okay, and actually now I'll leave them grouped because I'm just going to put a drop shadow and I actually want to apply it to every frame. So if we've got something grouped, it will apply to everything. What I'll do afterwards is I'll ungroup it and we can apply it individually to something. Okay, so in a very simple manner, I mean, in our effects panel, what we have got, which is quite useful, is just generally an opacity slider here. So you can see it's not tinting the images back, it's actually making them transparent. So if there's anything behind them, you'll start to see through. Okay, so for example, if you wanted to have these all in the background, you could put them as a separate layer and lock them like we did in the last exercise. So in itself, the opacity slider is quite useful for us. But what I want to do is apply an effect. So I've got the group here, click on the effect button, and this brings up the list of all the different effects we can do. So we've got drop shadows, inner shadows, outer glow, inner glow, bevel, emboss, satin, basic, directional, and gradient feather. Okay, some, again, with effects, I find with InDesign, certainly with experience of being a designer, is don't overdo them. You know, just use them to a subtle extent, and they can really help just pick things off the page a little bit. If you go too over the top, it looks a bit cheesy and a bit naff. But little drop shadows and little feathers can actually work quite nice for us. So if I go to drop shadow first here, okay, and when I select that, I'll pull this to one side. I'm just going to turn on the preview button there, so you can see straight away it's putting a drop shadow on all this for us here. Now when I've opened up the effect, it's still listed all the other effects under here. Okay, so I'm on drop shadow, I've got drop shadow selected, and these are all the options I've got to change my drop shadow. So I might want to change the opacity there, so you can see all this changing live because I've got my preview ticked on there. The distance, okay, the angle, where that's coming from. Now, global light, I've just turned that on. You can see when I do it, it changes global light. Global light is essentially something that anything that uses a lighting source on an effect. So with this drop shadow, it's presuming that there's a sun that's coming from this way to produce that effect. So what we want to do really most times is have global light turned on. What that will mean is when I apply an effect like this to another object or another frame within this document and use global light with that, it means all the lighting sources will come from the same angle, make it look natural. Obviously if I had these drop shadows, one coming that way, one coming that way, it would look a little bit odd. So we kind of do want to leave global light turned on. So what else we got in here? We've got the color, little color box. If I click that, this opens up my swatches panel, so I could change the color of the effect if I like. So it doesn't have to be black, can be anything. Haven't got any exciting colors in here at the minute, because we've not done the tutorial where we're going through adding swatches, but I will be doing shortly. So essentially all my swatches will be listed in there if you want to change the color of it. And the size, again, see it feathering out a little bit more. So I mean, it's fairly self-explanatory. You can just have a really good click around and see what these effects do. I mean, what actually happens with these effects, it actually embeds a pixel-based image for each of these. Okay, so it's not a vector effect. It's not scalable. It's actually made out of pixels. But then when we scale things, if I come back into InDesign now and scale this up and down, what it will do is regenerate that background file and embed it behind. We really don't need to worry about that. it kind of does it automatically, but that's just to explain what it actually does with these effects. Okay, so click OK, and again, because I've had them grouped, it's applied the effect to every single one of these. What I'm going to do is Object, Ungroup, and just remove the effects because I applied it to a group, but I'm not that concerned about that anyway, because I'm going to redo everything. Now, I'll show you a nifty little shortcut actually here. If I want to duplicate this frame, obviously I know I can go to Edit, Copy, Edit and Paste, Control and C, Control and V, but if I just start to move it, okay, I've not let go of my mouse, so if I press my Alt key, you see my arrow turns to a double arrow. Okay, so when I've not let go of my mouse, just start to move, press my Alt key, let go of the mouse, and it duplicates it for me. Okay, so just a really nice nifty little shortcut. It's in Photoshop, Illustrator and InDesign. Start to move an object, hold down the Alt key, and it will duplicate it rather than move it. Right, so let's have a look at this image here. When I apply effects, I like to just go into my preview mode because you can get a much better preview of what the effect's actually going to look like. So let's have a look at a different effect now. I'll click on the effects, go to Directional Feather, for example. Okay, so you see I have the Directional Feather turned on and click there, so I can actually just feather in from a certain angle there, like that, look. I can change the chokes. This is kind of how steep it is, look, how much it grades out there. So again, quite a nice little effect there that we could do. I'm going to say I can have that in Control and Shift to scale that up here. Go to my layers, drag it down to the bottom there so I can have a little sort of background effect of this image there if I wanted to. Okay, but I don't, so I'm just going to delete it. Okay, so there's loads of different effects. I'm not going to go through every single one. They're fairly self-explanatory. Inner shadow, outer shadow, satin, feathers and everything there, so you could just know where they are and how to apply them. I suppose the important thing as well, once you've applied a drop shadow, okay, if you want to edit that drop shadow, select the object again, and where it says object there, just double click on the effect and you can change it there as well, change the angle, or if you just want to delete it, you can grab it from there, drag it down and delete there as well. Okay, so that's some basic effects that we can do in InDesign, so quite easily, quite effectively as well.